Hi everyone, I'm Lynsey and I'm back for another live event with Stigma-Free Society. Now, to introduce myself again, I'm a registered clinical counselor and Surrey School District counselor for elementary age, kindergarten to grade 7 students. Now, please take a moment to review our video disclaimer in the video description box, and we're just looking out for you and your safety. So, I wanted to pause for a moment here and just acknowledge what's been going on in our world right now and yesterday with Blackout Tuesday. So, Stigma Free Society has put out a wonderful quote by Nelson Mandela, and I wanted to share it with you and just have a moment together to just pause and think this through. So, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So, us at the Stigma Free Society, we embrace diversity, awareness of stigma with a focus on acceptance of ourselves and others. So, we're here with you and we support you. Another post that we're putting out later on today that I came across is the hashtag Different Together pledge. Now, this pledge is particularly for BC, and it's Janet Austin, our Lieutenant Governor of BC, has put out an anti-racism video, and I watched it myself before this and thought it was fantastic. And she shared in the pledge the main messages are that we are inclusive as a province and diversity is a fundamental value. So if you want to get on board with this movement, you can see this post on the Stigma Free Instagram or Facebook later on, and check out the hashtag Different Together and BC's pledge. So thank you for taking a moment to pause and acknowledge that with me. So today I wanted to talk a bit about ADHD and impulse control and just what's that like right now during COVID-19. So you might wonder, why should we be talking about this? Well, it is a brain disorder and it makes our youth difficult to concentrate. So ADHD actually affects 5% of school-age children, and usually I see them diagnosed in around grade 1 or grade 2. Mostly for boys is the hyperactive type, and it seems to run in families and have some type of biological component. And approximately half of children with ADHD have another behavior disorder. Now, this is huge because this means overlap with disorders like oppositional defiance disorder, mood disorders, and anxiety. And as a school counselor, I see this a lot. And for me, I feel like it's a combination of genes, environment, and the child's experiences. So in the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there is 3 different types of ADHD. There's the inattentive type, the hyperactive type, and the combined type. So they're pretty much just as they sound. The hyperactive is when a child is having trouble staying still and they're really moving around a lot. So that's what hyperactive is, and inattentive, having trouble focusing in class or even just with regular routines around home. The combined type encompasses both of those different symptoms. So you might wonder, how is ADHD diagnosed? Well, as a school counselor, the teacher usually notices some of these behaviors in the child and mentions it to me. And then from there, I usually give them an ADHD assessment, and the parent fills one copy out, and the teacher fills out the other copy, just so we can get a better understanding of the different symptoms of ADHD that we're noticing. So from there, I score the assessment, and it's taken to the family doctor or a pediatrician who can look through those different symptoms and send the child to a psychiatrist or a psychologist that can diagnose ADHD and maybe provide medication if they feel that that's the best route of treatment. Sometimes at Child, Youth, and Mental Health, they take students or children with ADHD and put them on their wait list for services. However, their wait list can be quite long, so I'm going to mention a few different other options for you today for treatment and just different ways to cope with ADHD that are also really helpful. So, different ways to be treating ADHD. So, behavior skills intervention training is one big one, and cognitive behavioral therapy. So, this is what I try and do in my practice in teaching youth to focus on their thoughts, their urges, and really reframing those and thinking through social situations. Another option is parenting skills training in combination with CBT. And that's really important to get the parents on board and really understanding what's going to work best for their child and how they can help as a parent. Family counseling is also recommended sometimes, and also medication like a stimulant or non stimulant drug to help treat that hyperactivity and help their focus, but not necessarily always. Medication isn't always the best route, and some families are for it, some are against it. So there is many pros and cons that the families have to decide together and what is going to work best for their child. So, some different coping suggestions I have to share with you from Kelty Mental Health that I found were yoga, because it kind of slows us down and focuses on breathing and the body. And that can be really helpful for ADHD. Just regular physical activity in general, getting a good night's sleep helps any type of mental health problems, limiting screen time, finding more relaxing activities to calm the body. So that might be quiet, relaxing music, it might be doing some reading, or maybe more social activities. So organized sports or dance, and maintaining a healthy diet, because too much sugar for anyone can really amp us up. So for a kid with ADHD, it might amp them up even more. So making sure that they're having that healthy daily diet. So during COVID-19 for ADHD, why I think it's important to talk about is just our kids are at home, some of them, and some of them are going back to school, and they're feeling quite bored. Like not all their kids are in their class. I've been around Monday and Tuesday in the school, and there's only in some classes 2 or 3 students. So that could be kind of boring for them, and we need to engage them with more activities. Some classes have 6 or 7, but regardless, if children are at home, we need to engage them with some more exciting activities. So at the Stigma-Free Toolkit website, stigmafreetoolkit.com, we have some really great activity ideas. And the activity generator is really cool. When you push the button, there's lots of really great engaging activities right there for different children to try. And something new and exciting just by pushing that button is pretty cool. Also, we have our live events, our Monday workouts with Lynsey G, and our yoga with Fantasia on Friday. Because as I mentioned, that yoga can be really helpful for children with ADHD. We also just uploaded another new document, the mood tracker, and our coping with mental health videos. So those are really good in general for any youth with mental health concerns. And in particular, the mood tracker might help a child with ADHD be more aware of their emotions and what to do to cope moving forward throughout the day. A childcare worker at my school, I was talking to him about my chat today about ADHD, and he is actually an adult struggling with ADHD, and he has children at home that also struggle with ADHD. So I said to him, hey, can you help me out a bit with my talk today? What do you do at home with your children during COVID-19 right now to help them with their ADHD? And he said to me, the biggest thing, honestly, is I get restless. I get restless at home. So I really make a big effort to plan an outdoor activity with my kids almost every day. We go on different walks to different parks or by different rivers, try new places, and keep it new and exciting. He also said that they really have been maintaining a routine at home, and he finds that helpful for his kids. So really scheduling the time for them to be doing their schoolwork and limiting that screen time, so that it becomes a reward almost sometimes as well for social media time or screen time or video game time, and really separating that from the schoolwork. Just taking lots of active breaks, he says he does with them from the online learning, and doing a lot of hands-on learning. Now, he's posted some wonderful, cool activities he's done with his kids during COVID-19, and I've been watching on Facebook, and they've done so many cool hands-on activities at his house. They were drawing different kind of like stained glass art with chalk, all leading up to the path to his house, working on like gardening stuff, experiments, a lot of really cool hands-on activities that really grab the attention of kids with ADHD. So I really appreciated him sharing those great ideas. And just, he's mentioned engaging in crafts and activities. So it might be a little bit messy as a parent. You might be like, oh my God, I don't want my kid doing all these messy activities. But however, for kids with ADHD, if they can do more of that hands-on learning, and if the teacher can incorporate more of that hands-on learning, it really shows off their skills and their abilities to do more hands-on activities. So thank you to the CCW for my school for sharing those great tips for us. How I help as a school counselor. So as I mentioned before, I do that assessment, the SNAP. I send notes to a pediatrician. I also write individual education plans. So those outline different goals for the student for the school year of different things they can work on, fidget tools they can use, getting the teacher to use a visual schedule in the classroom or a visual timer to help them manage their time. And overall, I just try and help the teachers understand a bit more about ADHD. So I found this cool graphic. I'm going to hold it up for you that I printed off, and later I will share it in the comments as a link. But it's really cool. I like how they show ADHD as an iceberg and go through different steps of how to explain ADHD to teachers. Because on the surface, or at the tip of the iceberg, those are the things that we see. But underneath the iceberg, under the water, there's a lot more things that go along with ADHD that we need to recognize and empathize with and make some different accommodations as a teacher to help their learning to the best of the student's ability. So the obvious things at the tip of the iceberg are that hyperactivity, that impulsivity, the inattention. But hidden below the surface, less obvious things, are that their neurotransmitters, they have deficits there that impact their behavior. So just understanding that might be difficult, and executive functioning skills. So their memory and recall are not the same as other kids. They might have an impaired sense of time, which is why it's important to have some kind of visual timer or something to help them there with timing their work. Also, 56% of kids with ADHD have sleep disturbances. So just understanding as a teacher, hey, they might be really tired. Maybe they need an active break. I can go send them for a run, and maybe that'll help wake them up with some fresh air. They also have a 3-year delayed brain maturation. So they might act a little bit younger than their actual age. So say they are in grade 7 and they're 12 years old, but they might be acting a bit more like they are 9 or 10 years old. And that's common with ADHD. Not learning easily from rewards and punishments. So sometimes it can be tough for a kid with ADHD to accept and repeat their different misbehaviors, those consequences. So it can be frustrating as a teacher, as a parent, but just having that understanding that they're not doing it on purpose. It has to do with their ADHD sometimes as well. As I mentioned, the coexisting conditions, here's some more specific statistics for you. Kids with ADHD, 34% also have an anxiety disorder. 29% also have depression. 12% often have bipolar, 11% often have Tourette syndrome along with that, 4% can have obsessive compulsive disorder along with ADHD, and 54 to 67% can have oppositional defiant disorder along with ADHD. Wow, that's a big number. So in looking at their learning problems, they also might have a learning disability along with ADHD, and they might have a low frustration tolerance. So just helping them with coping skills around anger and talking that through with them and having that open communication can be really helpful. So many problems overall with ADHD are not visible. It might be mild, moderate, or severe. So just because you have a student in your class this year with ADHD doesn't mean next year a student with ADHD is going to be the same. It's kind of like a continuum. It can vary from mild, moderate, to severe. So yeah, I found this graphic really helpful. Some other things that I do with my students, I think I mentioned this in one of my other chats, is I use this controller kind of template and get them to write different coping skills for each button. So that's a cool way to talk about our impulses and how to cope. Another one I do with my students is using my mental filter. So thinking about language and social situations, because kids with ADHD are quite impulsive, they often say things they don't mean. So by doing some social skills training and thinking those things through, it can be really helpful for when those situations do arise. So we'll do something similar to this after the questions. I'm excited to do more pencil and paper things with you. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do as a school counselor. I also have some pretty cool games. I'm just going to show you a couple because I think they're kind of cool. So you get to see what I do in my office. So this one's called Should I or Shouldn't I? And it's for kids age 8 to 11. There's also a version for teenagers. And there's some questions and a behavior rating scale. So the scale goes from 1 to 5. At the top of the scale, number 5 is behaviors that are against the rules. At 4, it's behaviors that are annoying. At 3 is behaviors that make others have weird thoughts. A 2 are behaviors that are fine, they're okay. And a 1 is behaviors that make others have good thoughts. So when we play the game, we pull these blue cards together. Myself and the student both play. And we discuss the situations together. So I'll read a couple for you. One is, you're at the bank with your mom. You see a tray of candy on the counter. You take several handfuls and put them in your pocket. Oh my goodness. That is a 5 out of 5. That's totally against the rules. So you get the student to recall what they think it is. At the grocery store, your mom asks you to pick out a box of cereal. You put 4 boxes in the cart. Well, that's kind of annoying. So that's a 4 out of 5 on the scale, and the kid gets to guess. You and your family are at a farmer's market. You run into one of the teachers from school. You smile at her and say hello. Well, that's a nice behavior, so that's a 1 or 2. Your teacher asks you to share your writing with the class. You decide to use an alien voice while reading. Okay, well, that's a bit strange. So that would be a number 3 out of 5. It's going to make others have weird thoughts. They also have these challenge questions that are kind of cool, and they get the child to just answer them out loud. So for example, if an older kid is bullying you in your class, what would you do? Name 2 things that make your parents feel annoyed with you. So just thinking through and being more self-aware. Okay, a second game I have is Kids' Daily Dilemmas. So sometimes I will put my own ideas specific to the child in this jar and their social situations to think through. So you can even just have these conversations at home and write out your own social situations. You don't have to spend $20 on a game like me. You can write your own social situations. So here's some examples to think through. You've asked your younger brother to stay out of your room. Still, whenever you're not home, he goes in and rummages around. How else could you react besides getting angry? So just talking through those situations and playing a fun game. This one's pretty relevant. Other kids tease you because you're adopted in a different race than your family. What are some ways to handle this? So just encouraging communication and self-reflection. I also do this fancy named thing called social mapping, and it kind of relates to both of those in that we think through different social situations, what would make others have good thoughts, what would make them have uncomfortable thoughts, and what should we do moving forward. So that's pretty much what I have for ADHD, and I have that little drawing activity to do with you afterwards. So I want to hear from you. Do you have any questions around ADHD, impulse control, or anything else that I can help you with as a school counselor that you're curious about? I'm just going to scroll down here and see if we have any questions. Yoga therapy is really helpful. Yes, I agree. My 9-year-old uses our trampoline daily multiple times because she has a lot of energy. Yes, that's a great one to be doing outside, especially for kids with ADHD, right? Getting that energy out. Slime, yes. Tactile sensory tools are really helpful for any child regulating their emotions. What's the difference between ADD and ADHD? Okay, so as far as I know, attention deficit disorder was originally put, I think, in the DSM-3, and they changed it over to encompass ADHD, which is attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So they kind of just changed around the name so that they could separate those components of hyperactivity or inattentiveness, and then the third subtype being combined, having both of those. So that's the real difference, is they just they changed around the name so that we can have those two differences separate. And there's kind of different treatments for each. I believe inattentiveness is more common in girls, and hyperactivity, like I mentioned before, is a bit more common in boys. So thank you for that question. What do you find are the biggest struggles of kids with ADHD? Well, there's just not enough support, to be honest. Some of the kids with ADHD really could benefit from having an education assistant in the classroom to help them. And unfortunately, there's just not enough to go around, and I wish there was more. One student in particular I'm thinking about in grade 4 really struggles with his ADHD, and the EA in there is wonderful. She is not assigned to him as a student. She has a completely different student, and she takes it upon herself to also help this poor grade 4 boy with ADHD, and he really has trouble sitting still. And so she'll take him for runs and she'll take him for walks. So I think that's a big struggle for kids with ADHD. They feel different, and they don't want to feel different from the other kids, and they want to make friends. So I think sometimes it can be hard for them to make friends when people only see that outward behavior. Which actually reminds me, I forgot to mention a really cool resource. So the Center for ADHD Awareness, it's called CADDAC. They have wonderful videos for normalizing ADHD, and they're a cartoon, and they're really fun to watch. So I actually play them in my office with my students, and we watch together, and we both kind of reflect on what it means to have ADHD and normalizing it. So listening to other kids, they have kid stories as well, talking about their ADHD and this cartoon series. So that's really helpful in normalizing it. And so they don't feel different, like you mentioned, Dr. Dana. So thank you so much for that question. Another cool program is the Rolling with ADHD parenting program, and that's a parenting skills program that I'll also put below in the comments from this talk. Another question here is, how can we support a friend with ADHD? I think just educating yourself and having that self-awareness and understanding as well. So maybe seeking out some different resources on mental health. We also have that on our Stigma-Free toolkit, understanding different mental health disorders that Dr. Dana wrote, and it's fabulous. So just being more aware and asking them, if it's your friend, asking them, what do you appreciate? How can I help? Is there anything I can do to help support you as a friend? So just being open and honest and having those conversations, I think, is most helpful to support a friend with ADHD. Is ADHD a lifelong condition? Great question. So as I mentioned before, the child care worker at my school says he has ADHD as an adult. And yes, it is a lifelong condition. And as we grow into adults, we learn to cope with it a bit better, right? And our energy level from a child is obviously going to start to decrease a bit as we get older. So yes, it's lifelong, and we learn to cope as we go along. And hopefully some of my tips here can help kids feel more normal about their ADHD, because it is quite common in schools. Absolutely. Do you think video games such as Roblox are not healthy for kids with ADHD? I think too much video games and screen time isn't good for anyone with any mental health concern, really. So just really limiting that, as the childcare worker at my school mentioned, he uses it kind of as a reward sometimes as well. And getting them outside, he says, is the biggest thing to engage them, and just talking through accommodations with their teacher and just kind of brainstorming different ideas with whoever wrote their IEP as well. Usually it's the school counselor, and you can be a part of that process as a parent and give suggestions of what you notice at home that really helps. So don't be afraid to suggest things that you think are awesome as well as parents. How would you explain the DSM? The Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders just basically breaks down different symptoms of different disorders, and basically a psychologist is to use it. As a counselor, I have it because I took a psychopathology class, but I'm not required to have it. I'm not able to diagnose as a counselor or school counselor. I can only notice and different symptoms and mention it to the parent to go to the family doctor for a diagnosis. So that's pretty much what the DSM is. What role does medication play in managing ADHD? What other therapies work too? So like I mentioned, it's usually stimulant medication. For some students it works, for some it doesn't. I've seen in some of my students before it makes them really lethargic and tired, and I don't feel like I have the same kid there. So it's really a family discussion to have with your family doctor or a psychiatrist about the pros and cons of medication for ADHD. because we don't want them to be lethargic and tired in class and completely change their personality. You want to balance the doses so that you still have the same child there, the same energetic child, but just a little bit less energy, a little more focus. I would suggest trying behavior skills therapy, parenting skills training, and cognitive behavioral therapy before medication, just to see if those other things can work first, and changing their diet and making sure they're getting enough sleep. So yeah, there is some more natural remedies to try first before medication. Gardening outside, yep. Awesome, and that's the DSM explanation. Great. Just double check if there's any more questions. If not, we can do the talking bubble, like I mentioned. So we're gonna do something similar to this. We're just gonna draw a nice big talking bubble on our page on one side, and on the other side, we're gonna write some things that are not okay to say, because for a lot of kids with ADHD, they struggle with their language, and we wanna encourage them to think through what they say. So you can arrange your paper however you'd like. I'm gonna put mine this way, horizontal. I'm gonna draw a nice big talking bubble. And those are gonna be the things that are okay to say. And on the other side, we're gonna write keep to myself, or let's just say don't say at all. Don't say. So let's brainstorm together. What are some things that a child should not be saying at school or at home with their parents? And this is an activity you can do with your child, talking about this language. So for example, calling someone stupid, that's not okay to say. So I'm gonna write that first on my paper. I'll just show you how it's looking here. Never call someone stupid. That's really hurtful and triggering. What else could we say, not say at school? I hate this. When I was a teacher, if I heard a kid under their mouth say, I hate that, or I hate this, it really offended me personally, right? So it's not okay to say that we hate something. It's okay to dislike something, but when we say we hate something, hate is such a strong word. Another thing I noticed with kids with ADHD is bathroom language. Oh my goodness. Sometimes they have all this bad bathroom language that they should not be saying, especially at school. So that's going to be on my don't say list. Also, I hear outside on the playground a lot, or with other kids playing when I go anywhere really, shut up. That's a horrible thing to say. So I'm going to put that under my do not say list. With older kids with ADHD, sometimes their swearing language is not very good. So swearing, especially at school, is a do not say. Even just saying this is boring with youth. This is so boring. So that's going to hurt your teacher's feelings, your parents' feelings, whoever else is around you's feelings when you're saying everything's boring, right? So trying not to use that language. Saying I can't in general. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I can't. That's just really negative language to begin with. So that's going to definitely be on my don't say. And with everything going on with Blackout Tuesday yesterday and just diversity and appreciation for diversity, we should not be saying any type of racial slurs or racial language that is inappropriate, and discussing that and being open about that with our children and letting them ask questions. So I'm also going to write that on my do not say. If you have any other ideas for do not says, you can put them in the comment box. So now let's reframe some of these things not to say. Let's think of things that we are allowed to say, better language. So instead of, we don't want to be calling someone stupid at all. So maybe we can think of something kind to say, a compliment. So it's okay to give someone a compliment. I'm going to put that in my talking box. Give someone a compliment. Tell them they look nice today. Instead of saying, I hate this, I think you're entitled to an opinion, you can say, I dislike this. It's okay to dislike something, but hate is such a strong word. Another thing, the bathroom language and saying shut up. I don't like the language shut up or the bathroom language. So instead, maybe we could say something like, Can you be a bit quieter, please? Can you please quiet down and just request our needs in an appropriate way? Can you please quiet down? And instead of bathroom language, why don't you tell a funny joke to one of our friends? That's appropriate, right? Not all funny jokes involve bathroom language. All right, a couple more. Let's see. Maybe you don't like the way the teacher's teaching the lesson. It's boring. So maybe you can express to her, can I share my learning in this way? Share my learning on a poster, share my learning in an iPad video, share my learning by building something. So I'm going to leave that blank. Can I share my learning in blank way? So offering a suggestion. Can you help me? And instead of saying you can't do something, maybe you can ask, can you help me? And a big thing in the schools right now is the growth mindset. So that's that positive language. So instead of I can't, we want to say I can. So that's going to be my last one for my talking bubble. So here it is. Okay to say and don't say. And just being okay to have those conversations with our children. So I think that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in and letting me talk a bit about ADHD and impulse control. If you have any other questions, feel free to write them in the comment box and I will get back to you. And take care this week, everyone. Thank you.